Imagine stumbling onto what looks like metal trash in the middle of the woods. On our exclusive clip for tonight's enthralling edition of Moonshiners, show stars Digger Maines and Mark Ramsey are walking up to what looks to be an abandoned still or distilling rig left to age in the clearing. Their companion is a new younger fellow named Kimbel, who is a legacy moonshiner. Kimbel is relatively new to the core cast. His mission is he wants to uphold the ways of the moonshiners and continue his grandfather's illicit spirits making and hard work. This delights Digger and Mark, who worry that a whole generation of kids have absolutely zero interest in following in their footsteps. A young outlaw with an old pot still earns an apprenticeship with Mark and Digger Maines. Kimbel is a young man who is proud to find his granddad's still, but there's a lead lining to this silver cloud. The three are walking in the woods, and together they muse on scary things that happen out there, with Digger saying the scariest thing is the law sneaking up on them with their badges out. Get updates on the latest posts and more from monsters and critics straight to your inbox. By submitting your information, you agree to our and CS and privacy policy. They come up to what is called a laundry kit, which is a Prohibition-era copper still that was ordered out of a catalog as a washing machine of sorts and was soldered up to become a still. Unfortunately, the soldering is made of lead, which can cause blindness and death. Digger and Mark inform Kimbel they cannot use that relic of moonshiner history for modern still spirit making. But it sure would look great as decor in a bar or for a collector. But the gumption that Kimbel shows Mark and Digger is impressive to these veterans, and the two men want to work with him and take him on as an apprentice. Digger says Mark and he both need to pass the torch, and Kimbel looks to be the one to receive it. Honestly, this is a piece of moonshine history, says Digger. This can't ever be used for making liquor, says Mark, noting the toxicity of the lead seals. They ask if Kimbel wants to make love in liquor or fight in liquor. Who knew there was a choice? Digger can usually be found making mash and slinging the funny lines. He was apprenticed under Popcorn Sutton and is always refining his recipes and experimenting with Mark Ramsey to add new varietals and revolutionize the craft, as the flavor profiles of their mash are played with, shunning the traditional techniques for creating moonshine. Also on tonight's episode, Mountain Man Mark Ramsey tackles a week-long run to hit an $18,000 order that includes special delivery. Also, in what appears to be a desperate attempt to fix his worm barrel, Josh Owens dives in headfirst. Watch as Kimbel takes Digger and Mark to an isolated stretch of the woods where his grandfather's old still is set up, and where he has already churned out some illegal shine. Moonshiners exclusive. Mark and Digger stumble onto moonshine history with new blood. Kimbel, Mark, and Digger, the renowned moonshiners from Moonshiners, are no strangers to the art of making liquor from raw ingredients. With years of experience behind them, they faced countless challenges, run-ins with law enforcement, and witnessed the rise of new talent in the moonshine world. However, what they didn't expect when they ventured into the backwoods of the Appalachian Mountains was an encounter with someone who would both humble and surprise them. Kimbel. Kimbel is a quiet, reserved man in his early 30s with a reputation that precedes him but is shrouded in mystery. He's known in certain circles for his unique spin on moonshine, an approach that blends modern techniques with ancient traditions passed down through generations of his family. His recipe is as old as time, yet his execution is anything but conventional. The story begins when Mark and Digger are heading into the woods for a routine task of checking their stills and ensuring everything is in working order. They've been making moonshine for decades and have perfected their craft, but the lure of something new has always caught their attention. As they make their way down the winding trails, something in the air changes. The smell of fresh pine gives way to something more pungent, more enticing. It's as if the mountain itself is inviting them to discover something they hadn't anticipated. It's not long before they stumble upon a hidden clearing, tucked away behind a dense thicket of trees. There, amid the foliage, stands a makeshift still. But it's unlike any they've seen before. The still is intricately designed, using materials that seem to come from a bygone era, yet it's far more efficient than anything they've ever worked with. The setup is sleek and old school all at once, combining the best of both worlds. As Mark and Digger cautiously approach, they hear the low hum of a motor running in the background. The sound isn't like the usual rumble of. It's steady, deliberate, and strangely modern. It's not until they round the corner of the clearing that they finally lay eyes on Kimbel, tending to his still with a concentration that borders on obsession. Kimbel looks up as they approach, his piercing eyes giving them a once-over, as if weighing their intentions. He's not the type to trust easily, but there's an undeniable respect in the way he regards Mark and Digger. They've earned their place in the moonshine world, and Kimbel seems to know it. Well now, looks like we've got some company, Kimbel says in a voice that's as rough as the mountain air. You two come here often? Mark, never one to beat around the bush, shoots straight from the hip. What's this? Never seen a setup like this before. Kimbel smirks, wiping his hands on his denim jeans before extending one of them toward Mark. Name's Kimbel. This here's my setup. I've been working it for a while now. Digger, ever the curious one, takes a step forward and inspects the contraption. It's got a modern touch to it, he says, eyeing the copper pipes and pressure valves. But there's something ancient about the design. What gives Kimbel's smile widens, but there's a hint of something more, something akin to pride. Well, you see, my family's been making moonshine for generations. I've always wanted to find a way to honor that history while also pushing the craft forward. What you're looking at here is the result of years of trial and error. It's a hybrid, old school meets new school. Mark nods, impressed despite himself. He can see the passion in Kimbel's work, the kind of passion that drives a man to innovate while still respecting the past. But he's also skeptical. Mark knows that moonshiners, especially ones who try to mix tradition with modernity, can sometimes end up with something that just doesn't sit right. You mind if we take a look inside? Digger asks. Kimbel shrugs. Go ahead. But be careful. It's a delicate process. The trio makes their way to the still, where Kimbel explains his methods in painstaking detail. Unlike most moonshiners, Kimbel incorporates a small amount of locally sourced grains, but his secret weapon is the wild yeasts that grow on the mountain. These yeasts, which Kimbel has studied for years, add a distinctive flavor to his moonshine that Mark and Digger have never tasted before. The wild yeasts give it an earthy, almost floral note, Kimbel explains. It's got a smoothness that you don't get from traditional methods. But the key is in the balance. The stilling process has to be just right. Too hot, and it burns off the subtle flavors. Too cold, and you end up with something too thick, too syrupy. There's a delicate dance involved. As Mark and Digger listen, they begin to realize that Kimbel's approach is more than just a gimmick. It's an art. It's clear he spent years perfecting his craft, blending the best of both worlds to create something truly unique. The conversation shifts, and Kimbel begins to open up about his family's history in moonshining. His great-grandfather, a man of humble means, had started making liquor during Prohibition. He was a man of few words, but possessed a genius for creating something that could pass for pure gold in the eyes of the bootleggers. His moonshine wasn't just about getting people drunk. It was about creating something that carried the essence of the mountain with it, something that connected the people who drank it to the land itself. My family didn't just make moonshine. They made history, Kimbel says with a quiet reverence. When Prohibition hit, my great-grandfather became one of the most sought-after moonshiners in the region. and that reputation carried through to my grandfather and my father. Mark and Digger exchange a look. They've heard stories of legendary moonshiners, but this is something different. Kimbell's story feels grounded in something real, something far deeper than the simple act of making alcohol. We've got something like that in our past, Mark says, his voice tinged with nostalgia. Our families were moonshiners too, back during the war. Not everyone knew what we were up to, but we kept it going for a long time. Kimbell smiles, recognizing the familiar bond of moonshiners across generations. It's more than a craft, it's a way of life. You don't just make liquor. You make memories, you make history. And when you've got something worth passing down, you protect it. You take pride in it. As the afternoon fades into evening, Mark and Digger find themselves reflecting on the lessons they've learned from Kimbell. His approach is bold, but it's rooted in deep tradition. He's not just making moonshine. He's keeping a family legacy alive, while also pushing the craft forward with his innovative methods. Kimbell, in turn, has come to respect Mark and Digger not just as fellow moonshiners, but as men who understand the true essence of their craft. They may come from different backgrounds, but at their core,